Hello. So today I wanted to make a video on how to land a software engineering interview without referrals or experience. So this video is to demonstrate how to land an interview, and I will make a video later explaining how to convert those interviews to an actual job. So let's get started. So what do employers typically look for? So the first thing that employers look for is, do you have the relevant knowledge and skills for the position? So if the position is, for example, a web developer position, and the tech stack that they use is React for the front end, chances are if you have React skills or if you've worked with React in the past and can demonstrate that, you will probably be passed on to the interview process. The second thing that they look for is experience. So do you have the relevant experience? So I use the word relevant a lot. So it's like, is the experience actually catered towards the job? So if you've worked 5 years in back-end positions and you're applying for front-end positions, you don't have 5 years in front-end experience. So ultimately you lack experience in front-end. That's so essentially, do you have that relevant experience? Now, these four, communication, behavioral, and ability to solve technical and coding challenges, are not relevant for you landing interviews. So essentially, these are more relevant when you are trying to convert that interview to an actual position, to the actual offer. So we'll skip those four over and we'll go over the credentials. So do you have credentials that are catered towards the position? For example, the position, if it's a data science position or an AI position, they might want you to have a master's or a PhD, or they might want you to have some sort of certification proving that you can provide the value in AI and machine learning. So that could be a certification, that could be some course you took, or that could be even some research or publication you've posted. Cool. So the key reason you probably aren't landing interviews. So the first reason that most people overlook is the fact that your resume probably needs work. When people see rejections, they automatically assume it's because they don't have the experience, they don't have the skills, this, that. Ultimately, it just could be the fact that you have a bad resume. So your resume is the single pinpoint where recruiters will look at to really identify whether they should pass you forward to the interview process or they should filter you out. The second thing that a lot of people overlook, which is extremely powerful, is your LinkedIn page. So your LinkedIn page needs work. LinkedIn is a tool that you could use where people can search up your profile directly and ask you to interview right then and there without you ever even having to apply for any positions. This is so powerful because ultimately you're letting the recruiters do the work and find you rather than you trying to find recruiters and trying to convince them to give you an interview. So it's better to have the opposite effect where they're trying to convince you to interview with the company, right? The power should be towards you, not towards them. The third thing is you're not applying to enough positions. So ultimately, it is a numbers game. The more you apply, the more interviews you land, and you must consistently apply. You must keep those numbers up so that ultimately it sort of like snowballs over time. And at some point now you're doing interviews almost every day. So it is a numbers game. And then the last thing is you lack experience. An experience, it doesn't necessarily mean how many years you've worked. Experience could mean you don't have the relevant experience in the tool that they are looking for. You don't have the relevant projects that they're looking for. So essentially, you're not able to demonstrate the fact that you can do the job. So let's deep dive into the fact that your resume needs work. So chances are your resume is probably more than 1 to 2 pages. I personally have a personal rule, or I have a rule that my resume cannot be over 1 page. That is because I don't have enough information or relevant, relevant details about my career to justify more than 1 page. And that's because I'm not a PhD student. I don't have like 50 publications. I don't have like 20 years of experience. I'm a new grad. I only have about 1 to 2 years of experience. And I think that should fill up 1 page, and that's about it. Anything more than a page is I guess useless information. You have no relevant information in your resume. Similar to if your resume is more than 1 page, if your resume doesn't have anything useful for the position or for the recruiter to make a decision on, chances are you won't be passed on to the interview process because again, the recruiters are looking at thousands and thousands of resumes, and they need to be able to filter the resumes out as quick as possible. You lack keywords on your resume and are failing the ATS scans. So ATS systems are essentially application tracking systems that big companies use to filter out thousands and thousands of resumes to only get the good ones who score high in their ATS algorithm. And the ATS algorithm has a bunch of criteria, the biggest one being the keywords. So do you have the relevant keywords in your resume? Lastly, you have tons of grammar and spelling errors. So ATS systems will obviously give you a lower score if you have tons of grammars and spelling errors. But on top of that, if a recruiter sees tons of grammar and spelling errors, they will also filter you out. Cool. So the next thing that I want to talk about is your LinkedIn page probably needs work. So LinkedIn, again, is a powerful tool that you can use to land interviews without even applying to jobs. If your LinkedIn doesn't have a professional picture, your profile is empty and has little to no information about you, and you lack keywords in your profile that recruiters use to search for candidates, chances are recruiters will not reach out to you. And maybe you apply through your resume, somebody looks up your LinkedIn profile and they don't really see a lot of information there. They might not even pass you over to the interview process. So your LinkedIn page is definitely something that you need to put a lot of focus on, and you need to basically optimize for search engines so that recruiters may find you and DM you for positions directly. And trust me on this, you might even land more interviews from LinkedIn than you might from just applying to jobs from LinkedIn profile searches. Rather, you will still be applying to positions on LinkedIn. Again, you're not applying to enough positions. Landing interview is 10% skills and 90% a numbers game. So you aren't leveraging features like LinkedIn Easy Apply to send hundreds of applications in a few hours. And you're wasting too much time personalizing each application. So typically personalizing each application, like writing up a cover letter, cold emailing the recruiter, so like that, do that for positions you really want. Don't do it for every single position. If you want to go apply a full-time job at Google, yeah, for sure. Like personalize your application, make sure your resume is catered towards the job description. But like 90% of other companies, like small startups, like whatever, just apply, send your application. If they don't reply, don't reply. If they reply, great. You have another lead for another potential job offer. So just continuously apply and consistently apply. And one thing that I like to tell people is do not apply on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. That's because when people typically apply on Fridays, the recruiters, they don't work on weekends. So they might get off on Friday, 5 p.m. And your your application might sit there for 3 days. And within 3 days, maybe 200 to 300 other people apply. And now your resume is one in maybe 200 to 300 other people. So it's like the recruiter has to scan through 300 people. You're just one in 300, right? So if you apply from Monday to Thursday and the recruiter looks at it the next day, the chances are that pile of resumes is a lot shorter and you might be at the top. So they might be able to put more emphasis on your resume and, make a decision based on like the actual resume rather than the skimming 6 to 7 seconds of what they see in your resume. So that's what they typically do. They spend 6 to 7 seconds per resume if there's way too many, and they filter it out as quick as possible. Versus when they have a smaller stack, that's when they have a lot of more free time to like actually dive through the resume, understand the experience, understand the story of the person, because your resume is basically a story about your career. And that gives you a higher probability of converting to an interview. And yeah, you probably lack experience. So experience doesn't necessarily have to mean how many years you've worked. Experience could mean your projects, what tools you've used in the past, how comfortable you are in those tools. And yeah, your skills might not be relevant to the position. So if you're applying for a web development position and all your experience is in backend, it's not really relevant. Sure, like you have some experience in terms of years of work, but you don't have the front end experience to back up, I guess, the process of landing an interview. So ultimately, if someone who's worked less years than you but has done more front end, they will be more likely to land an interview for that position than you are. So ultimately, you work on whatever industry or whatever aspect of software engineering you're trying to get into. Work on those relevant skills, figure out what you need to do, build those projects. And one thing is you have nothing to demonstrate your skills. You can say, I know this, I know that, but you have nothing to show for it. You don't have a website, you don't have a project, you don't have the work experience. So you need to build those things. You can build those things by starting up your own side project or creating a website or, a small project with friends. You create those things, you put them up on a website, you link them on your resume, and now you have demonstration of your skills. And the recruiters will look at those demonstrations and say, okay, cool, this person knows what they're doing. Let's pass them over to the interview process. And lastly, you're probably applying to the wrong positions. So a lot of people will, their experience is mostly in back end, and they'll start applying for like AI and machine learning positions. That's just not how it works. You'll probably not land those interviews, and even if you do, you might not convert those interviews to actual jobs. That's because first of all, the interview process for different aspects of software engineering is significantly different. If you apply for a web development position, your process will be different than if you apply for a cloud solutions architect, for example. Same thing with data science, same thing with machine learning and AI. So apply to the positions that is relevant to you. If you are trying to switch to a different aspect of software engineering, first figure out what you need to do. Build your portfolio, build out your projects, demonstrate your skills, and then apply to those positions. And then you can say, okay, I'm ready to take on a new role. So I just wanted to, before I go over this putting it all together slide, I wanted to show you my old. Okay, so let's take a look at my old resume. This resume is from 2018. I was using it to apply to internships and co-op positions, and I wasn't landing any interviews. So let's start off. The first thing on my resume is this objective statement. This objective statement is completely useless because if you read through it, seeking a position as a software developer, utilizing and enhancing my leadership, problem solving, and communication skills, blah, blah, blah. Recruiters know this already. Recruiters know that you are trying to advance your career, and recruiters know that you're looking to work at an information technology based organization. They already know that, so it's pretty irrelevant, and just remove it. The second thing that I did wrong was I put education as a second thing on my resume. So when a recruiter has 7 to 8 seconds to filter out a resume, the second thing they look at is education, and that's not what I want, because education is something that's common across pretty much 100% of all applications for internships and co-op positions. So every single internship and co-op positions, chances are the person applying has some sort of education background. They're still in school. So this should be the last thing that I want them to see. I want them to see my experience. I want them to see my skills, and I want them to see why I'd be a good fit as an intern at their company or business. And this applies to even full-time positions. So now let's look at experience. So that I obviously have technical support as an experience, but you can argue that that's not part of software engineering or the IT, and it's more of an IT industry. But again, let's just overlook that for a second. Let's look at my other two experience. So volunteering at Providence Healthcare and liberal canvasser. Like that's completely irrelevant to the position that I'm applying to. Like why do they care? The fact that I was a cashier, an events organizer, taking phone calls, it doesn't matter to them. What matters to them is, can I write code? Can I write front-end components in React? Can I write REST APIs in Node.js? Ultimately, this section doesn't explain or demonstrate any of that, so they don't even know if I can do the job. So they're just going to filter me out. I'll probably by the second section, but if they get to the section, they'll probably filter me out right then and there. So now let's look at our skills. So these skills are not technical at all. It doesn't demonstrate like what I know. It says I'm excellent in problem solving, excellent mathematical skills, but those are all subjective. Like that part they'll decide during the interview process. So putting that on the resume is completely useless. So getting the interview is, do I have the relevant technical skills? The soft skills come from the behavioral interviewing round, which comes later. And if I can't even land the interview, what does it matter, right? So I would say swap this out with essentially a more technical skill section where I like explain the backend technologies, the front end technologies, the cloud technologies I've used. And yeah, awards, again, pretty useless. I would put that under education, but employers don't really care. Like it's maybe at an internship they might, but as soon as you graduate and you have 1 or 2 years of experience, they don't really care what you've achieved in university. They care more about what you know and what you can provide for their business. So yeah, and then I have this activity section, which is completely irrelevant to the position, and it was meant to like provide some like personal flair to my resume, but ultimately it's just a waste of space. Like it doesn't provide any value, so I'd say just get rid of it. I'd move my GitHub account to the top and any sort of social at the top, so that's the first thing that they see, because I want them to see my GitHub. I want them to see my portfolio. So that is definitely something that should be at the top, and the first thing that they notice, like, oh, this person has a GitHub. let's go read through it. And okay, this person has a bunch of commits. Okay, clearly they know how to code. Cool, let's pass them over the interview section. But like if it's at the bottom, they'll never see it. They'll never get to it because they'll probably filter you out here, somewhere around here. Cool. So that was my old resume. Pretty bad. Things I can improve on. But yeah, like as you can see, the resume is definitely one of the important parts. Okay, so now let's look at my current resume, which is what I used to apply to my last position and obviously my last interview rounds. So first and foremost, obviously I blurred out all the address information because I don't want you guys to stalk me. But other than that, the first thing that you notice on my resume is the skills section and the experience section. So these are the first two things that I want the recruiter to see. And these are the first two things that I want them to essentially make their decision based on in the first 7 to 8 seconds. So as you can also see, I've bolded some of the keywords so that it's easier for the recruiters to land their eyes on this and say, okay, this person has experience in AWS, React, Node.js, GCP, Azure. This person knows those things, and those are the relevant skills that we're looking for this position. So in the first 7 to 8 seconds, once I've captured their attention, now they'll start actually reading more of my resume. So as you can see under my experience, again, the titles are bolded. So that's the first thing that I wanted them to see. I want them to know that I have internship experience. I want them to know that I worked as a lead backend engineer at a startup, and then I was a level 2 engineer at another startup. And yeah, the information within here, like that's what I want them to read after the fact that I've grabbed their attention. So once I've grabbed their attention, then they'll start like going through the nitpicking my resume, figuring out like whether I'm a good fit for the position and whether to pass me forward to the interview process. And that's where I start demonstrating the skills that I've used in each position. So for example, I'd say I use the databases Postgres and DynamoDB. I've used Elasticsearch to optimize search. I've used AWS Cognito for authentication. Obviously, a bunch of AWS resources and services that I've used in the past. I've worked on iOS and Android applications, and I've linked them over here. And yeah, and then I've done web development as well. So all of that information, the recruiter can get after grabbing their attention. And then education section, obviously at the bottom, because again, every single person will have an education section. And even if they don't, most companies these days don't care anymore. Especially, for example, Elon Musk openly admitted during the Tesla conference that he doesn't care about the education. He just cares about whether you have the right knowledge and right skill set to provide value in the position. And then this technology section is purely for the ATS scanners and the keyword scanners. I put as much technology as the tools I've used in the past in here so that the ATS scanners increases the score of my resume. Okay, so that's it. I just also want to go briefly over my LinkedIn profile. So as you can see, profile picture, software engineer at Top Hat, my experience, and then under each experience, I wrote down the tools I use. This is primarily for keyword searches, so that when recruiters search up for a specific profile, that my profile shows up. And yeah, and then endorsements and recommendations help you also boost the score of your profile during the SEO for search engine optimization. So definitely very useful as well. So let me just give you a demonstration of like how this works. So let's say I want to search for React developer. I want to search for people, and I see these three are the first three that show up. I'm going to connect with them and message them saying, hey, are you looking for any new positions? I have this position opened up. So that's typically how recruiters do it. And they have a completely separate dashboard where this is all, they can automate a bunch of this stuff. But ultimately, the algorithm used to bring these profiles up is essentially based on the keywords, based on the positions, and based on years of experience and other information like that. Even the profile picture increases your chances of being shown. Cool. So getting back to putting it all together, these are the few steps that you should take to essentially ensure highest probability of landing interviews. A one-page resume with sections in the following order. So this is the order I use, but you can use different orders based on your personal taste, work experience, projects, relevant skills, and then lastly, education. Optimize your LinkedIn for SEO purposes so that recruiter may reach out to you directly for interviews. That's going to be a huge advocate for landing these interviews. So again, make sure you do that. Mass applying to as many positions as possible and remaining consistent. Monday to Thursday, apply consistently Friday to Sunday, don't apply and just use that to improve your skills. And then, yeah, lastly, keeping yourself accountable. Don't let a few rejections discourage you. Essentially, just keep it consistent. 1 or 2 rejections doesn't really matter. Over time, you'll be consistently applying. You'll have a pipeline of interviews going. And at some point, you might have interviews every single day. Some might work out, some might not. So don't let the rejection discourage you. Just continue doing what you need to do. All right, so don't forget to smash the like button. If you like the content, feel free to subscribe and provide any feedback in the comment section. See you guys in the next one.